Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. 888-589-8840. John McCain weighed in on Robert Gates. This is clip number 9. Weighed in on Robert Gates' book, in which I believe he had a scathing criticism of President Obama for his lack of leadership. And I've got a Bill Gates or a Robert Gates clip I'm going to play following this John McCain clip. But McCain's being asked to kind of weigh in on this, and you listen to this soundbite. I want you to listen to the last part of it. Candy Crowley is going to interject a question about whether it was appropriate for Bob Gates to write this book. And McCain, to me, just completely starts talking in circles. I mean, I really don't understand. It's like he's trying to say two things at the same time, and they're both contradictory, and he doesn't know which one, doesn't know where to land. So it's very confusing to me. See if you can make any more sense of it than I can. Candy Crowley talking about this book and says, look, we're still at war in Afghanistan. Was the timing of the Gates book appropriate? Here's how McCain's first crack at the answer.
I'm a great admirer of Secretary Gates, and he and I have disagreed from time to time, but I think he's one of the finest public servants that I've known. He's obviously very frustrated and felt, which by the way surprised all of us who know him, and he's decided to really kind of let loose. And by the way, most observers would say that Hillary Clinton's vote for Iraq versus Barack Obama's against it was a determining factor in who gained the Democrat nomination. And I'll never forget Hillary Clinton saying she would have to have a willing suspension of disbelief in order to think that the surge would work. But I think that Secretary Gates is frustrated. I'm a great admirer of his.
Right, but was it appropriate?
The question, I think, frankly, I might have, if I had giving him advice, I would have waited. But as far as waiting till it's over in Afghanistan, I wouldn't have done that. But maybe retrospect of a little longer than now. But I also respect his ability to voice his views anytime he wants to.
That just cracks me up. That's the Straight Talk Express. Maybe a retrospect of a little longer than now, but I also respect his ability to voice his views anytime he wants to. So that's the Maverick John McCain. Not sure where to land on talking about Bob Gates. Now, drop down to clip number 12, Rob, if we can. This is Robert Gibbs. And Robert Gibbs here is criticizing. He's the former spokesman for President Obama, and here he is very harshly critical of Robert Gates for this book. Let's listen.
Marlin Fitzwater told me when I went to see him before I became press secretary, he said, you should not write a book that your boss has to answer to while he's in office. And I wouldn't write a book while he's in office. Look, Gates made his own decision. Let me address the politics of this. I think if you look at every national security decision that surrounded 13 meetings on Afghanistan, there wasn't one decision that if you looked at where the American people were on putting another 3,000 American troops in Afghanistan that was even remotely politically popular. The war right now is as unpopular as anything going in America right now. The notion that the president, and I think this is why, again, it's maddeningly self-contradictory, Gates puts in front of the fact that somehow that politics was driving decisions, yet each and every decision that the president made was absolutely contradictory to the politics.
To the politics of the moment. That's an amazing spin to put on this by Robert Gibbs. You know, the first thing, he quotes this Marlin Fitzwater, who I don't remember which administration he served, but don't write a book that your boss has to answer to while he's in office. Well, Robert Gates resigned in 2011. Barack Obama is not his boss any longer. And I said this before, I think Robert Gates wrote the book because he's alarmed at what he saw in the Obama administration. You know, and I really think the question here is, you know, and one other thing before I get to that, you know, Robert Gibbs talking about how unpopular this war was. Well, it wasn't when President Obama took it over. Remember, he said it was the necessary war. This was a smart war. Iraq's a dumb war, headed up by President Bush. That's a dumb war. I'm not against all war. I'm just against stupid wars. Iraq's a dumb war. Afghanistan's the necessary war. That's the smart war, and people backed him up. was not unpopular when he took it over. President Obama made it unpopular, and now Robert Gibbs is trying to turn that into a plus for Barack Obama, not going to get away with it. Now, the real question here about Robert Gates is not, to me, it's not why Robert Gates spoke so soon, but why he waited so long. This information that he had about President Obama, that's information we needed prior to the election in 2012. He had the information. We didn't. The only way we could get it is if he delivered it to us, and he didn't. So it makes it look suspiciously like he had his own motives, not the best interest of the country, but the best interest of his wallet. And he was accusing Hillary Clinton. Well, he wasn't accusing them, just reporting that their position on the Iraq war was purely politics. It was all driven by what would work to their political advantage. And he was critical of that, and rightly so. Well, I mean, I think it's what's good for the goose, good for the gander. Looks to me like his primary consideration is what's good for his wallet, not what was good for the country. But let's go back to clip 11 where Bob Gates is being interviewed, and he talks about the difference between Barack Obama and George Bush when it came to a wartime footing. Let's listen.
It's one thing to tell the troops that you support them. It's another to work at making them believe that you believe, as president, that their sacrifice is worth it, that the cause is just, that what they are doing is important for the country, and that they must succeed. President Bush did that with the troops when I was secretary. I did not see President Obama do that. And I said, as I write in the book, it was this absence of passion, this absence of a conviction of the importance of success that disturbed me.
So there's a strong contrast there that Gates draws between President Bush and President Obama. President Obama had a conviction, or President Bush had a conviction about the mission. He loved the troops. Gates would talk about how he saw President Bush's eyes well up. That's how deep his emotional investment was in committing troops to battle, how concerned he was about that, how important it was that that only be done for the highest possible causes. And we've talked about this before. I disagreed with some of President Bush's deployment situations, disagreed with them at the time, still disagree with them. I believe we should have gone into Iraq and Afghanistan. We shouldn't have stayed in either place. Once we knocked the Taliban out of power in 2001, we're out of there. Once we depose Saddam, pull the statue down, pull him out of his hidey hole, he's hung by the neck till dead, we're out of there. So I disagreed with President Bush on some of those decisions. But the one thing I know for an absolute fact, I'm as sure of anything I could be, President Bush would not have done that if he did not believe it was best and right for the United States of America. He would not willingly put American soldiers in harm's way unless he was convinced that the cause was just and necessary. And Bob Gates, look, I never did see that conviction, an absence of passion and an absence of conviction about the importance of success. It's like success in this military venture did not matter to President Obama, and I think that is that's pretty cutting criticism, if you ask me. Well, let's go to the phones. Let's go to Stephen in Dalles, Georgia. Stephen, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to make a comment earlier in the program. You made reference to scriptures that say that God elevates men to power that are over nations. And I think that we need to take a different view of that scripture because, I mean, what complacent Christians will sit back and say, well, God put them there. We might as well submit to them. But God didn't place the men in the White House and into Congress. We placed those men there. God placed a ruler over this country in 1789. The ruler over the United States of America that was put in place by God is a document, not a man.
Mm-hmm.
Those men that are in the Congress and in the White House, he allowed them to come to power because he gives us free will to choose who we're going to serve. Are we going to serve the Constitution, or are we going to serve ourselves by placing men in power that give us what we want?
Well, yeah, and I agree with you about that. You know, we elected Barack Obama. I mean, we can't blame God for that. You know, and again, I agree with you. There are some complacent Christians who interpret that, apply that verse completely differently, and he'd say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. God's going to put whoever he wants in there, so let's not vote. Let's not bother to talk about the issues. Let's not bother to be thinking citizens. Let's just let God do whatever he wants. And what they don't realize is that God carries out his will through people, not apart from people, not independently of people, but through people. This is how God does his work. He always does it through people. So how does God elevate? How does he depose? He always does it through human instruments, through human agency. So, you're exactly right. We can't point the finger of blame at God. We're the ones that are responsible for the administration that we have. We put him in power. And you think back, Stephen, to what God said to Samuel when they wanted Saul, and finally God says, look, give him a king. They're not rejecting you, Samuel. Don't take this personally. They are rejecting me from being their king. And so God eventually will give us the kind of political leadership that we insist on having. All right, Stephen, thank you. Let's go to Jeff, Sioux City, Iowa. Jeff, Sioux City, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I thank you for your program. I'm a brother in Christ that's in that bottom 40% of taxpayers that you were talking about.
Uh-huh.
And I just thought maybe I'd bring a little different perspective. I don't like the system any better than you or our other listeners do. But brother, sometimes it's a question of what do you do? I work 60 hours a week, 2 jobs. I've been blessed with a big family. And so we do that so that we can stay off of assistance. But it comes time for tax return, and we fill out our paperwork, and they've got all these spots that you put your numbers in, and the system gives you child tax credits, it gives you earned income credits, all these things. And it's like by the time you're done, you've just put in the information, and the government decides you're going to get this much money back, and it's not what I paid in.
Yeah.
I don't know that the system, I think the tax system should be changed, not taking away voter rights. Otherwise, we'd go back to a system where only landowners voted.
Well, let me ask you this, Jeff. I'm out of time here, but see, what I would rather do is I would rather have taxes lowered for everybody so you can get paid more money so you can earn the money instead of having it taken out of the wallets of other people. And I bet you would like that much better, wouldn't you?
Oh, I would.
Absolutely. All right, Jeff, listen, I got to go. We're out of time. Back in